Tales from the Land. I'm Ryan Chamberlain. I've been managing editor of the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History for about 8 years. Introduce yourself.
John Grabowski. I'm the editor of the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, and I've been on the project since 1981. Yeah, that's a good word. Phew.
So I thought before we kick off this podcast series, and we've got some exciting ideas lined up in the future, I thought it'd be good to first take a moment and talk about, the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, why it's important, why encyclopedias like it are important, and encyclopedias in general, and why they're important for history. I'll give it to you. What are your thoughts on it?
The popularity of encyclopedias in the 40s and 1950s, that every family that wanted to educate its children bought a World Book, or if they had more money, they'd buy Britannica. And so that was the way. It was the internet of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Chunk up information, provide it in these little bits and pieces, sort of just put it together in an alphabetical sense. So they were popular. Encyclopedias allow you, if you've got a broad topic like Cleveland, allow you a lot of latitude in terms of what you're going to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you see in terms of been there from books to the internet? What is the biggest thing that surprised you, and what are some cautionary tales in terms of information, do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that surprised me is the longevity of the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, and that's the fact that it started out as a book published in 1987, republished as a 2-volume book in 1996 for the city's bicentennial, and then shortly thereafter it became the first encyclopedia online. So that moving from book to online, I think, is really important. And the other thing, too, is the founder of the encyclopedia is David Van Tassel, who was my mentor. And David was asked to create a new history of Cleveland in the late 1970s by Homer Wadsworth, who was the head of the Cleveland Foundation. And David said, I can't do that, because its history is a variety of topics, topical areas that you need to touch upon, and I just can't do it myself, don't understand that. And then he came back and suggested that we put together an encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things about the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, the first urban encyclopedia.
Well, it's the first modern urban encyclopedia in the United States.
Yeah, modern.
Modern urban encyclopedia. And then at the time we were writing the encyclopedia, my wife and I ended up in London, and I was shopping in a bookstore, and I saw a brand new encyclopedia of the city of London. So they sort of beat us to the punch. And therefore, we're the first modern urban American encyclopedia.
Yeah. The urban quality of it for me, and the scholarly pedigree of David Van Tassel, and which you can trace all the way back to
Merle Curdy,
yeah. And Frederick Jackson Turner. It's that kind of depth of thought that goes into it. And it may not have been even overtly intentional by Van Tassel at the time, but it's almost to me like he draws from that experience, that well of knowledge that's been passed on through those different ideas. And the value of the urban encyclopedia for me is that, in a way, it can tell the history of a space, and that space has a variety of different viewpoints. It's not telling one story. The history of a space has more than one story, and I think being able to tell that from different vantage points is an important thing.
Yeah, well, to pack it in a different way, I think, both Curdy and Jackson were dealing not with local history, but with regional history. So they weren't doing the grand scheme of where does American democracy come from. They were looking at it in a smaller package. Mm-hmm. I think that rubbed off on David. But they were asking David to create a new history of Cleveland at a time when all these important subfields came up: immigration, ethnicity, African American history, women's history, all these topics that were generating new narratives, the nation and society. And I think that was his feeling, was that he could never have the expertise in these fields, but there were experts in the city that he could draw upon to do that. So, that was the start of it. We went off and we corralled the experts and asked them what should be in it. And so the experts wrote the longer interpretive essays, but a lot of the short essays in that encyclopedia were from people in the city who had an interest. You don't need to be an expert in railroad history in order to be a railroad buff and to write a good nuts and bolts article about a particular railroad, whether it's a street railroad or a steam railroad.
To that point, I think it's talking about the essays and synthesis, not to get too nerdy or in the weeds about it, but we were talking earlier about looming. I met a person at a party one time who worked for Wikipedia, and we were chatting, and I said I worked on the encyclopedia too, and he was like, well, why don't you just copy everything and put it on Wikipedia? And I was like, no. But that got me starting to think about how we are different than Wikipedia and why it's important that we're different than Wikipedia.
It's important because we're not bots.
Yes.
Okay. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest, the hot topic now is chat GPT, but artificial intelligence. In reality, software bots in general, are generating a lot of material, and it's hard to know where that material is coming from.
Yeah.
So
the other thing I think we're talking about is opening this up to a broader public, and if you look at the way history has gone in a city like Cleveland, go into any drugstore or whatever else, you've got a rack of Arcadia books, okay,
Mm-hmm.
On one topic or another. People love history. I think besides the experts that David wanted to draw upon, he knew that the people were out there and they knew something. And so, and the other way I think it differs from Wikipedia is that, if somebody writes an article, it's reviewed and edited by somebody, not a bot, and it will go up. And there's always a screen there between who creates and when it goes up. I hate to use the word screen, but that's been very, very effective. And for those of us who read the entries that come in from the public, it's educational as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things with Wikipedia is they have a policy of no original thought, which is disconcerting in and of itself, but and that no original thought and no original research. And I think in a way, even though as an encyclopedia we do act as a kind of conduit or kind of a funnel towards deeper understanding of a topic, there are innovative ways that scholars or put synthesis together to get at a better way to approach the topic or a deeper truth.
Yeah, this sort of moves in a sideways direction, because one of the things that preceded the creation of the encyclopedia was the change in the archival community in northeastern Ohio. Places like the Western Reserve Historical Society had, by the late 1960s, created a Black History Archives and Ethnic Archives, collecting all the materials that they felt that scholars needed to create new histories. And so what the encyclopedia did was built on those collections that came out. So we're looking at original research. In Wikipedia, you have to cite a published work. In the ECH, you don't need to cite a published work. You need to have a solid piece of evidence. And I think that's important. That's what really does make us different. We allow people to use original research, original documents to create the entries.
Mm-hmm. So now, looking forward to this podcast, I feel like this podcast is almost an extension of what we're doing with the encyclopedia, shining lights on different areas. The name of the podcast is Ripples from the Land, but that's always been our goal. Our highlight is to show how Cleveland, what happens in a region like Cleveland, can have ripples across the world or across the country and the world.
Yeah, so. I think that's one of the things we want to do, and that's not done for what I would say for boosterism.
Right.
It's done just to understand the history of the city and how the city may have impacted other areas around the nation and the world. I think that's important. And if we choose an individual biography to be put in the encyclopedia, it's not necessarily a ripple with an individual biography. It's somebody who may have been a leader in their neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It may be an important cleric who served in a church and really changed the church's history. But there are people, Warner and Swayze, who basically, created a machine tool business, and that had an effect around the world and created telescopes as well.
Yeah,
so there are those things. We can get into Bob Hope. Wasn't born in Cleveland, comes here, the bridge named after him, yada, yada, yada. But
and we'll talk about some of the, Rockefeller later on in the series and things like that.
So there are those, but I think that allowing the public, and that's one of the things we have to do with the encyclopedias. We have to make the public more aware that they can really add to the encyclopedia. Mm-hmm. And I think that's critical. And that's how it started. We started the project by putting together what we call task forces.
Yes.
Groups of people who were interested in sports, groups of people who were interested in women's history, and then literally in a day before social media, sitting down at a meeting with them in somebody's house or a bar someplace and asking them what they wanted in the encyclopedia and taking notes, okay?
Yeah.
So I had a whole deck of 3x5 cards that we put together.
So on that note, I think we should, whoever's listening, if you're interested in possibly contributing to the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, please contact us on our website, ech.case.edu.
Right.
And, we have a contact page. And if you're interested, we would definitely like to hear your ideas. And we'd like to, unlike Wikipedia, which is undoubtedly harsher with new writers, we definitely interested in new writers, new ideas, and things like that. We'd like to help foster that.
We'll do editing on that, and we'll share it back with you. You get credit for the entry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we need is more input. And the other thing too, if you're on our website, you should be on our website, and you're reading an article and you find something that you think is wrong, just need to respond. And those dings come straight to me, and then I'll pass them on to one of our staff, two graduate students who work for us, really. So it's a little bit of overload at times, but that's what we want to do.
Okay.
I keep checking my numbers in the lottery. If I win big, we'll just endow a few more positions.
Yeah, but to that end, as we're kind of wrapping up this segment, we do the traffic on our website, even though it's not as maybe prolific as Wikipedia, it's still substantial.
Yeah.
Million,
we're up to 130,000 page views per month right now. But the thing that really interests me about that, of course, the bulk of the page views are from northeastern Ohio, but the encyclopedia is used across the world.
Yeah.
So you can see the sources on those page views, and that's what really pleases me about the way this project's gone. When it was a book, it didn't reach this many people.
Yes.
And so for whatever complaints I might have personally about our virtual world now, I have no complaint about that whatsoever.
Yes. Well, I think that's a good note to wrap it up on. Thanks for chatting with me, and thanks everyone for listening. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our producer, Dante LaFloria, for helping us put this together every week.
Yep. Amen.